Welcome to another episode of Sebastian and Sierp. We are so happy that you're here joining us once again for hopefully stimulating conversation. Hopefully some fun and hopefully maybe some learning if we're lucky. Tonight I've got a feeling all of those are going to happen because we have Joe Farrell on. When we first started the show, Aaron and I had a pretty short list of people that I absolutely wanted on the show, and Joe was one of them. So, Joe, we're so happy to have you here tonight.
I'm so happy to be on somebody's short list.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Yes.
So, you really have been sort of the, well, in my mind, the best known director in this area, or the one that is constantly doing shows. I mean, when did you start doing shows now?
Or maybe I've been just doing them the longest.
The longest.
With that in your name go. When did I start? Moved to, actually I started teaching at Georgetown College and that was in 1970.
But that's what brought you to the bluegrass?
Yes, and was teaching. Dearly loved teaching. God, I just have missed it once we moved out of that, and helped build a program there so that finally we were doing 4 or 5 shows a year, which was great. I was the prime mover, I guess you would say, and what was great about that, I could choose whatever we did, and that was wonderful. And I always felt like those years from 70 to about 2000, no, not 2000, 70 to 83, maybe something like that. It doesn't even fit for me now, but anyway, those years were formative, and I got a chance to make my own mistakes, and I didn't have somebody informing me that I just made a mistake. I think we're all pretty much aware of what our mistakes are and work to make them, but it was wonderful, and I had just great kids. And I started near the end of that tenure doing things over at UK. They were doing a wonderful program in the summers that used local talent as well as student talent, and it was just really great. I must also say that one of the jobs that I had, and I really liked it, was to teach the various athletic teams what was called a theater appreciation one night a week.
Oh, was this a compulsory?
Yeah, it was one of the requirements, right?
Yeah.
So essentially I had football players, basketball players, baseball players, for the most part. Occasionally somebody from maybe the track team, but it was the football team that was the biggest, and then the basketball team. So I had interesting, I don't know if I mean that in sort of a pejorative way or not, but guys who were working really, really hard to make their grades, I think. The basketball team didn't seem to have an issue, but there were any number of football players, and I'm really not disparaging them. I think that their backgrounds were such that they weren't quite sure what it is to go to a class and be expected to produce in a class, at least not on a college level.
Do you find that some people are just, you hear any number of opinions from people, but do you feel that some people are just cut out for it? I mean, they're born into it, they feel it, they understand when they watch a play, they see the through lines and the plot, and they're like, wow, that makes sense, or an actor that like really feels it. Do you feel that's
as
true?
As an audience? Is that what you're talking about? Or as anybody working in theater?
Anyone,
You know what? I think my own experience is that says yes, and I knew a number of people like this as well. I went to the University of Montana, and my undergraduate major was English, some speech, and I thought at the time I might even be a coach. So I took both football and basketball coaching, and ultimately, obviously, decided not to. But I loved my English curriculum, and there was a wonderful, wonderful teacher there who essentially focused on Shakespeare, and another really fine one who focused on modern theater, and those became the things that I really emphasized, and I so dearly loved it. But we were on a quarter system, and the gentleman who was teaching speech, and I was in what was an oral interpretation course, asked me to be in a play. I had done or high school, I suppose lots of people did, where you end up, doing the same things that 90% of the high schools around the country do.
Sure.
And that was just magic to do that.
Sparked something for you?
Just magic. And I thought, oh my God, here I've been doing, and I liked it, but here I've been doing this undergraduate work in English, and what I really believe that I ought to be involved in theater. That's needs to be my
So
life's
it's pulling you.
endeavor, right?
really felt that.
And way back then, I had to go in the Army. It was the beginning of Vietnam, and I decided that I would do ROTC because I got a choice, as opposed to and they sent me to Korea as opposed to Vietnam, which was wonderful. But I did 2 years, came back and got my master's, got a job in South Carolina for 2 years, teaching at a small college. That was great. Came back and worked with they'd formed what was called the Montana Repertory Company, and worked with them that summer, and then went on to begin doctoral work doing this stuff at Iowa. Did not like Iowa, did not get to see the inside of the theater while you're working on your PhD.
There's too much academia, you mean?
They really focused on
Right.
the philosophy part of Doctor of Philosophy. Yeah, you were in the library all the time. And
Well, I was going to say,
Sure.
that was one of the big reasons too that I really wanted to have you on, because part of the thing with the show that we're doing is really trying to go deeper into arts, philosophy, politics in some cases,
Sure.
religion, so on and so
Sure.
forth. But with people who actually have done it, not with academicians or people who have
Right.
theorized about it or written some really nice papers. And I love that stuff. I mean, I did my master's, I love it. But I love that,
Yeah.
I've directed 50
Sure.
or 100 plays or however many it is for you
Yeah.
now, that experience is harder to find.
It is.
With people.
It is. I did enjoy it. However, what you really want to do is do the doing,
Sure.
and so that's when I went to Georgetown, and that was about 1970.
Hey, did you finish your doctorate?
Yes, I did at Indiana University. Maybe 4 or 5 years later, I got a
So
lead.
you switched from
Yes,
Iowa
yes.
to there.
Indiana was really pretty good because their approach was both academic, if you will, but also performance oriented. So
Right,
doing both of those, and it was great. It was just so great. And as I said, then we move into Georgetown, and just marvelous. Loved teaching.
Yeah.
Moved from there to UK and taught there for 3-4 years. I don't even remember. Directed, did a couple of shows out in the community as well. And then Sheila and I decided we were going to hie off to New York, and went there for close to 6 years. for me, it was, I guess I would say, disappointing. Simply because it was so difficult to get involved. And I discovered, as I was trying to work, that the attitude of so many theater folks in New York was that if you're coming from college and university, you probably really don't know how to do anything. And I
This is an elitism.
rather found that, well, it was kind of like most of them did not have. Some, several, but not everybody, did have a degree, maybe, or at least had been there sometime, but they, I think they kind of felt like maybe, coming from my point of view, I was going to be one of those know-it-all individuals, and that was a problem that was difficult to solve. Now, we left to come back here, wanted to have a child, which ends up being my Hannah,
Right.
and probably is certainly a seminal moment in my life. But when I left there, I was doing stuff with both. There was a group called, if you can believe it, Theater of the Open Eye.
Like some Illuminati stuff.
Yes, yes. And it was, okay, and she was fairly nice, although she was one of the ones that I think was suspicious of us. But she was also the daughter of Joseph Campbell. Do you know Joseph Campbell?
Yeah,
Yeah, that was very
yeah.
interesting.
Joseph Campbell and Gina Erdman, it was their daughter? Like,
No, that was not her name. There was another one. And I'm
is
not
that the-
gonna-
but it was
I'm not
definitely
gonna
Joseph
remember.
Campbell? It was
Yeah,
his daughter?
yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
wow. Because I know he was married to Gina Erdman
The
for,
little, yeah, well, this was his daughter.
she's still alive. Gina, she's like 100, 106 or 7 now, still living.
Yeah, I know, still looking for the heroes. I think.
I like Joseph Campbell though.
Yeah, oh, I do too.
Yeah, yeah, I read a lot of
I
that.
read his stuff and I thought it was just highly pertinent to the kind of work that, we did.
Absolutely.
As well. It was just super. And also was working with Playwrights Horizons, and they tend to focus on new plays. And that was kind of fun, but it was sporadic and not all that satisfying. But while I was there, saw a lot of stuff, especially off-Broadway and off-Broadway. And, I think a lot of people go there because New York has become, I guess, the mecca for live theater.
So you,
And you've kind of made it if you've gone there. Now, usually that pertains to Broadway as opposed to the other theaters, but my God, wonderful work, new work, other kinds of things. But I felt, in terms of what I was seeing, that there was easily as good a talent back here as there was that I was seeing. And I thought, what I want to do is theater, direct plays, and I could do that back here and would have more opportunities than I knew I was going to get in New York. And plus, as I said, we were looking towards having a child. And so it came back.
Prefer to raise Hannah here than
Yeah. And this is all just, I guess, biographical.
It's okay, it's good to start this way.
I came back to a job, of all places, at Fort Knox. Fort Knox had, and still has, a full school district, preschool through high school. And the superintendent at the time had found money through the Department of Defense to build a performing arts center. I think it was like
Nice.
$6 million, $7 million.
Wow.
And I went there to do that and try to bring groups in for, students. And I also then was able to set up an arts education program that ran first grade through
That's
high
marvelous.
school.
Yeah, I didn't know you
And
did
those
that.
are things that I believed very passionately in. The job was good. I was going to make the kind of money we needed for our family, and I was still able to do theater. We, let's see, initially lived in Elizabethtown and directed a couple of plays for a community theater there, moved to Louisville, and worked with a theater called Bunbury. They still exist on Main Street now, along their other smaller theaters.
Close to ATL.
And yes.
Yeah, close there.
And started also driving down here to do summer Shakespeare.
Right.
Yeah, and kind of worked into that, and
Which is
finally-
where I
Yes,
met you. Yeah.
absolutely. And Sheila and I said, you know, most of the people we know and the friends we have are in Lexington. Maybe we should go live there. And we basically said, Sheila wondered, okay, should we live halfway? And I thought, oh, Jesus, well, that's two of us then driving both directions and going. I
Right.
said, no. So for close to 20 years, I drove from here to Fort Knox every day, and then came back. You know,
That's a bit of a drive.
yeah, we started Phoenix Group Theater back in the 90s.
I remember.
And that
Great
went
shows. Yeah.
6 or 7 and did wonderful things, and did some things with Actors Guild, and more recently with, Woodford Theater. They've kind of changed it to that.
Yeah, of course, I was there for your, the Mice and Men you did a few years ago.
What a joy.
Wonderful.
Wonderful.
Really a
wonderful.
great show.
And those actors are, as I said, as committed as I am, and I know they found that same kind of passion
Right.
that we work with.
It showed. I mean, we had Kevin Hardesty in there. You had
Yeah.
Walter Tunis.
Yes,
Courtney Waltermeyer.
yes, that was her
who was
first show with me.
an acting student of mine.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she was
Yes,
down at Asbury. And that's where I met her, yeah. So,
that's cool.
yeah, she's super sweet. Hey everyone, listen, we'll be right back with Sebastian Sierp with Joe Farrell. Don't you move.
At Kyojuteiru Kempo, we believe that everyone has the right to defend themselves and their loved ones. Violence can visit us despite age, race, or gender. Call us at Kyojuteiru Kempo or check us out at kyojuteiru.org. kyojuteiru.org.
Hello, I'm Chip Sebastian. I am the co-host of Sebastian and Sierp. If you've been liking the shows, please click like down below. And if you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel, jump on over to YouTube, click subscribe, and you will get the most recent episodes of our show where we're interviewing all kinds of great and interesting people. So we're looking forward to a lot more shows. Stay tuned. It's rolling. Just begun. And we are back. You see how easy it can be?
Well,
There's
I
no
know.
need to complicate things.
I know.
There is no need to complicate things.
We'll onward and upward, as they say.
Did you have something earlier?
Yeah,
Say something?
I was gonna ask if, going back to New York, if you thought there was a greater level of elitism in theater versus film.
You know what I think is that there was more individuals thinking that they were going to be professional, and that made them better than what we have happening here. I never agreed with that, but that was certainly an attitude I ran into, not across the board or anything, but yeah. Yeah, it was.
Do you mean just having the idea of I am a professional, like I'm getting paid something
Correct.
for it, and therefore I'm better?
Yep.
And that, okay.
Yep.
As opposed to, we go through a series of exercises and trainings, and we just do shows, and we actually do it, and 3 years later, we've done a bunch of shows, and now we are better because we've been in the lab working it.
Yeah, to a certain extent.
that what you
Many
mean?
of them learned, it was on-the-job training for them. And I don't find fault with any of that. I think if that's what you want to do, then you find your way to doing it. Any number of individuals. One of the things I think that became very important at that time was that increasingly colleges and universities had developed what was called an MFA program, Master of Fine Arts, and you could focus with your degree on acting or directing or any of the technical areas. And that was a heck of a lot better if you wanted to be on the production end of things, make plays, as opposed to study
Yeah, doing an MA
drama.
to PhD
Yes,
route.
yes, exactly.
Purely
But they
academic.
didn't, it really exist when I was working. I would have just thrilled to,
See, I was so
program.
hopeful that the University of Kentucky would develop an MFA program years
yeah,
ago.
talked about it when I was there.
Well, and of course, they had the MA there for years with the intent of going on and doing the PhD program, and it's just fell through for a myriad of reasons. So for those of us who went through the master's program and completed it, we were kind of left
Yeah.
like, you know,
Well, that's very true. Now, I think they developed, did they not, a BFA?
I believe they do have a
Degree.
BFA, and
Yeah.
they have been leaning in recent years toward a dance major
Yeah, yeah.
versus a minor.
Yeah.
And some of that's because they brought in people that can develop that kind of program.
Yeah.
They're wonderful. But UK is just, there's so much terrific potential there, not just with the talent, but facilities and so on.
Yeah.
It's,
Facilities.
facilities, yeah.
One of the biggest issues, I think, for any of us who want to do theater, in any number of places, but certainly here in Lexington, it's really, really difficult. You kind of envy studio players. I mean, that's their home. They can rehearse there, build there, do essentially the kind of work that you need to do.
Right.
And don't worry about that. If we could talk about the Downtown Arts Center, which of course is part of it, you don't have that luxury. So you find and probably pay for a rehearsal space. And unless you can get wonderful individuals donate space, you're probably renting someplace to build whatever sets you might have as well, and then you've got to move them in down there.
Yeah, and you understand why a lot of theater groups have been doing more of this sort of theater on the go, or
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
theater moving through the actual space.
Yeah.
And
Way back when we did Phoenix Group Theater, we were so lucky. The library had pretty much just opened, and especially opened that theater. Found it to be just a nice theater, but they pretty much gave us carte blanche.
this is the Ferris you're talking about.
Yes, it
Right,
is.
Ferris, right.
So that we built there. We needed to rehearse elsewhere and found, I don't know, church basement. I'm trying to think where else. Spaces where we could in fact rehearse. I think we rehearsed once over at Dunbar. Trish Clark was there.
Yeah.
And speaking of local, what should we say, stalwarts, those who in fact have shorn up what we've been doing around here, Trish Clark is certainly one of those individuals. She just retired from Woodford County, where she was artistic director, but the work that she did at Dunbar High School for any number of years was
Yeah.
remarkable.
Been tireless.
So we could do
for a
that.
long time.
Yes. Yeah, I think she's the star around here. I truly do. Lots of good people, but Trish is one of a kind. One of a kind.
Yeah.
Helped so many.
Very easy to work with.
Yes, yes.
Which goes a long way.
Yeah,
Which, you know,
goes a long way.
it really
Yeah.
goes a long way.
And I met her, she was working on her master's when I was teaching at UK, and I had her in classes and directed her, and we just kept on going along. I loved it, and her especially. And you know, there are any number of people around who have both earned a reputation for their prowess
Sure.
as actors, designers, but have remained loyal to this particular area. I think there are several who are still here who could have found a way into even a regional theater and found employment.
I'm always fascinated by what keeps people here or has them leave. Sometimes it's something as simple as, well, I'm going away to do a degree or I got a job. But other times it seems like there's, I don't know. It seems like the path has always been here if you really want to
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah.
But all of my theater and film friends, pretty much, and myself too, we had to have that time of going away and feeling like we got to
Yeah.
go wherever the place
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
And then you go and do that and you sort of realize, well, it's,
Yeah.
you know, it's,
Yeah.
in about 90% of those cases, they came back here or didn't stay in the place that was the
You
place.
do realize that, in fact, you can go home again.
Right,
and
yeah,
work.
it's not like Wolf claimed.
Right,
Yeah,
not at all.
Yeah,
So, and that's just been great.
yeah.
From my particular point of view, I think the work that's going on now, Athens West, has been going along for, I don't know, 4 years maybe?
I'm really looking forward to their upcoming season. Bo actually advertised with us.
Good.
And so I think those are going to be some
Yeah.
stellar things he's putting
Yeah,
together.
I think they can.
He's really,
Will please the audience.
Mover and
You
shaker.
know, their choice of plays over the period of time has been awfully good. I think a tilt towards newer plays. But, you know, they've got the other thing, Brighton Beach Memoirs they're starting with this year.
yeah, that's going to be fun. I
And
mean, it's hard not to have fun with
Oh, yeah.
that play.
And
so.
it's so well done, and I think they'll be able to do it really, really well.
No.
I'm impressed with what's going on at Transylvania now. Their new chairman is very interested, I think, in having a challenging season each year, and that wasn't happening before, or there was only maybe a couple or whatever. I mean, they're starting with picnic this year.
Wow, that's
And yeah, I dearly I'd love to have been involved with that.
yeah. It's funny, you know, that's a film. When you think about the film of that, that's one that doesn't get mentioned that often. That was a really good movie. They did a fine film of that. But
Yes, and the play on Broadway was done and received such remarkable.
right.
And Athens West last year doing what? Was Afraid of Virginia Woolf?
Yeah. You got to be ready.
Well, yes, yes, you
Yeah,
do.
that's-
You
Yeah. You got to balance.
you can at times just make the hair on the back of your neck just kind of stand up and saying, oh my God. I saw it when it opened in New York, and
Did you really?
it was jaw-dropping for me. I just thought,
This is in what, early 60s, right?
yeah, I just have to.
So listen, I got to tell this story, all right? I got to tell this story. I didn't tell Aaron I was going to do this, but
Yeah.
I'm going to tell the story. So, so I'd been in a bunch of school plays and everything, and I thought, man, I really want to get in the Shakespeare Festival. This is 1989.
I had just come back.
Yeah, you were directing Lear.
Yes,
Yeah, Fred Foster.
yes.
Olivier had just passed. He
Right.
just passed. It was the talk of the summer. Olivier's gone, right? And so anyway, I go into audition for you, and you said something along the lines of,
Yeah, that's nice what you did there, but tell a joke. And so I wound up telling that Bear and the Rabbit taking a crap in the woods joke. You remember that one?
Tell it again.
Yeah, Bear and the Rabbit are taking a crap in the woods, and the bear looks down at the rabbit and says, "Hey, Mr. Rabbit, when you take a crap, does it stick to your fur?" And he said, "Well, no, Mr. Bear." And so the bear wiped his ass with the rabbit. And you laughed so hard, and then I call it. Yeah, he wants you to come in and do the show. So
Yes.
So
Wouldn't
I'm
let you
thinking
tell
the
the
joke got
but
me into
yeah.
the show instead of my audition. But anyway, yeah. it
But
was,
you know, that was cool.
yeah, it was great.
That was
it
cool
fun.
because that was you.
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
And it was over at Bell House.
Yes.
Yeah, when we had auditions
Yes,
there. So
yes.
it was. But yeah, what a fun ride though, and so then after that, there were numerous plays that followed. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what do you think it is that really draws people to go to theater? I mean, there's kind of the pat answers of, well, theater holds a mirror up to our lives, and we know there's a truth to that, but like in the case you were talking about New York, if you're throwing down $100 or more for a show,
Isn't that a shame?
yeah, I mean there has to be something driving that, perhaps the mythology of it, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I probably ought to toss it right back at you, and we both can deal with this and say, what got you going in theater? I've kind of indicated what got me going. I dearly loved the idea of being involved in something where I could work both, as they say, inside and outside. I think an actor really gets who he or she is and looks to find ways to involve that particular part that you're aware of and find ways to connect then the character to who you are. I don't think I think you move away then, and it's very important, you move away from the artifice that often you will find in a performance. I think that's one of the things I dearly love when I go to theater, is that I watch the really good ones tend to lose themselves in the life that they're seeing on stage. I think it's absolutely crucial, because then you're forced as an actor to find a kind of honesty that's there. And so the kind of things you learn and you come to treasure are not so much what you're doing with your voice or how you're moving, but that's been part of your training. And it's become the kind of thing that you don't have to focus on when you're performing a role. What you begin to find is using your ability to both listen. I can't tell you how many plays I see, and I know darn good and well that all that's happening with the actors on stage is that there are some who you can see just waiting for the cue.
Yeah,
And then they pick it up
throwing
and
dialogue
go,
at each other.
and are not involved, and essentially, there's a term that many of us have talked about in saying, okay, what you just saw, an actor who could be very good, but basically what he or she was doing is just playing the surface. They are illustrating the character and the part. And so it essentially stops. They may be very good at the interpretation and carrying the very surface of the meanings that are there, but really are missing the why of that. Where does that come from? And so that it becomes unique, I think, to that individual character. It's one of the things I think you really, really look for, that listening and the sense of getting who you are involved in that world that you're making. I think it's one of the wonderful things about doing plays, for example. Lots of good plays are done over and over again, but none of them are the same.
Right.
And it has to do with the people who are involved, the direction that it's going, and often there are things you end up discovering, it happens to me a lot, that you didn't really see that was there, but suddenly it is there, and it makes sense. It made it make sense. You were going to say something here.
Well, no, it occurs to me, and just from doing shows and teaching dance all day, pretty much every day, that, when I have new people coming in, or even people that I've been teaching for a long time, there's this thing of, we're here doing whatever we're doing. We may be dancing or moving or whatever, but there's this sense of the watcher being over here, right? The watcher's hanging out, and depending on how judgmental or critical the watcher may be, that can really stifle whatever authenticity you might be trying to find.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But there's a difference between that and what you just described, even though I think they go together.
Oh, yeah.
Because when students have, like when they're frozen and, can't move at all, let's give him a second there.
This thing just keeps going off by itself. It's not running out of time, it's just stopping.
Okay.
That's probably your fault.
Hey, you sound like my wife. Anyway, picking up with that thought. To me, there's a difference between if you have a student or an actor or anyone for that matter who has this huge watcher that's constantly going, wrong,
Yes.
incorrect, how could you, and all of the, the tapes playing constantly, and I think that it so stifles not just creativity but just living in general. So there's that issue, and for some reason, I haven't really had that. I don't remember ever having that voice, and it wasn't until I started in theater that I heard it described, and then I started teaching that, or if I do have it, I'm very unconscious of it. I'm not conscious of it to the point of, being like, oh, there it is again. Right? Right. So, but I'm sure it's there probably, but it's just not, but the issue you were talking about in more, and not just pertaining to theater, I think it's just pertaining to our relationships anyway, the listening aspect. Whenever you watch Actors Studio or something, there's always this sort of pat cliche thing,
well, listening is everything in acting, you know. And I think it is, but I think for a person hearing that who may not be in the theater, they might go, what does that mean exactly?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, I think the next question is, who's listening? I mean, it's important, but it isn't the actor per se. It's that character who's doing the listening and taking all that in and essentially working with that. You know, one of the things we talk about is those wonderful playwrights who essentially have such a gift with the poetry of language. Tennessee Williams, for example, and you say, but I really maintain that the dialogue that has been written and given to you, sorry folks, just a little technical difficulty.
We're back.
Yeah, we're back. And I have to get to where I was.
You're talking about Tennessee Williams and
Yeah, and that dialogue is special. And I think that what you end up needing to know is that everything in there is forcing you to respond. If it's a long speech, forcing you to take it down the road where it's going. It's unique in that regard. It's not every day where, you know, you can just bullshit as you go along with this, and there may be some important things you talk about. But I think, going back to your question, that's one of the things, the most important things that bring people into the theater, is that play and the language, but what's the world that you end up seeing? I think in part the mirror up to nature is rather important. I think they come to be entertained. I know any number of individuals, however, who won't go, say, to Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, because
They don't feel that.
right, their days are, they just say, my days are just shitty enough, I don't want to go and be pounded, my senses pounded for 3 hours.
Yeah.
I'd rather go see Brighton Beach Memoirs.
See, I really think it's important as, like say you're just a consumer of theater and you're just going and seeing, not participating. I think it's important to know when to balance those things. In other words, I mean, there's a place for, you know, Ibsen and Pinter and these playwrights that you go in and go, God, what is this? You know, and then you walk out going, you know, I don't know what that was. You know, it's like looking at Picasso. You know, you're going, I don't know what the hell that is, but there's something about that. There's something that's triggering me.
It did something for you.
Yeah, and I'm changed somehow. I'm not sure how. But I think you have to balance that, because if you're, you know, all that and not any Disney, you know, then so I don't know. Do you agree with that? Do you think that?
Well, yeah, I do. As you're setting up a season, I think is what you're saying. Okay, what kinds of things, genres, if you want to say that, are we going to put into the season? Are we going to do all Pinter? God, no. Ionesco, that would be, nobody would be coming by the end of your season.
Yeah. Some Seneca in the park. Or?
Oh, geez, Seneca. Oh my God. Seneca just kind of needs to be kept in the closet unless you find that there's somebody who just takes one of those plays and wrecks it and makes it work.
Right.
From a point of view, and you have no idea where it's coming from. But then that could be very interesting. But boy, there's just
it's tough.
yeah.
Well, I mean, even the Shakespeare's, you know, like Titus, I mean, which is taken so closely from Seneca, right?
Yeah.
And is so bloody and so gross and everything. How often does that get done?
Not very often.
Not very often.
But interestingly, I can, at least one film,
Yeah, Julie Taymor did
Yes,
that
she
really
did.
good
Yes.
Anthony Hopkins version, which is nowhere to be found now.
Yes, I know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought it was great.
Yeah.
You know.
And well, Shakespeare is, I think, in a world, those plays all by themselves. There certainly have been attempts to, one way or another, bring them into the modern world, even, changing dialogue essentially, or simply setting them in a different place in time. The justification for that, always as I understand it, and I hear people talk about it, is modern people are going to therefore understand it better than if they see King Lear, for example, in its intended setting by Shakespeare. I really don't buy that. I think if there's a story there, and there always is, and it's told clearly, then it doesn't really, where it's placed really doesn't matter, and I rather like most of them. For example, the histories and some of the tragedies, for me, don't work. I hate seeing, I don't know. I was going to say, like any of the Henrys.
You're talking about when they're put into another time.
And put into another time. The one that, for me, worked absolutely astonishingly was a production of Richard III, and it was placed in the First World War, and it played remarkably well within that context, or the concept made it work within that. But there's
Is this the Ian McKellen one?
Yes, it was.
Right, yeah.
Boy, you're really good.
Yeah,
Thank you
was
for
a good
that.
one. Yeah.
You're
Yeah, that
really
was-
good.
No, and I think you're
Yeah.
right. That one really did work. And that most recent Lear that the BBC did with Anthony Hopkins too, I believe it was brought up into the last
Yes.
200 to 300 years.
Yes.
And that
Yes.
was outstanding. I
And
thought.
again, I think there are those actors and a point
Right.
of view that can be presented and maintained, and it has a lot to do with what you think the play is about. And the best ones, Shakespeare's best plays, can be about any number of things, and
Right.
it depends on what you end up emphasizing.
How you spin it.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
For sure. One of the more effective of his that I saw certainly was Merchant of Venice. And interestingly, it was that first year me working on my doctorate
Oh, yeah.
at Iowa. I told you I never got involved in anything. But there was a wonderful production, Merchant of Venice, and it was the Merchant of Venice as performed before the Third Reich in whatever year it was.
Mm-hmm.
And all that was there was this wonderfully huge platform in the middle. And there were Nazi soldiers then patrolling, and you see German officer coming out and they're kind of talking and whatever, and then there was something like, all right, bring them in. And then there was this huge door that opened with lights behind it, so the light shone on the stage, and you heard the feet going. And you had
like
these,
a goose stepping
yeah,
type of.
well, no, it ended up being the Jewish individuals who were going to try to perform merchant for
Oh, okay.
the Nazi
So they kind of did a
audience.
switcheroo
And
scale.
it was kind of, they were just marching in. And what you got were small shadows, large shadows that diminished as they came through in the light, and you suddenly saw these ragtag emaciated individuals, part of the Jewish concentration camp who were going to perform this.
Wow, and so the shadows almost
Yeah.
had a sort of German
Right.
expressionistic.
Well,
type
to a
feeling.
certain extent,
Yeah.
and then they're brought in, they're forced to climb up onto this platform, sit down, and they begin to perform the Merchant of Venice. And obviously,
crazy.
the focus was on the anti-Semitism that was part of that. Now, that's obviously not the only element within the play, but it certainly was a focus. And when they arrived at that famous speech, when you prick me, do I not bleed?
Right.
And he gets so worked up in that speech that ultimately he leaves the other actors and virtually goes over and gets in the face of one of the Germans standing there.
Wow.
And to talk about being a human, and got so
Like to tie those two
involved.
things together.
Yes, and essentially there was just a big furor, fights kind of going, even with some of the prisoners who were on stage, because they were afraid that they're all going to get tossed into, I guess, a gas chamber or whatever else. And but essentially, the play ended there. Did not finish the play. They all were tied up together again, down the stairs, and marched out through that door. And you saw them in the light and the shadows, and the door closes at the end.
See, that could be interesting too, because I could see as Shylock keeps pressing for the pound of flesh, being like a German Inquisition rather than a
Exactly.
court. Really,
That was all part of that.
Yeah. Wow. That's
And
that's
so that
dark,
was
man.
very effective.
It's really dark.
Right? Yes, as that play's world is brought into, I don't know, 1943, 44, however you want to think about it. That was just amazing. And it was, yes, dark.
Yeah, it's very dark.
And it was also happening while the Vietnam War was going on.
Oh, so war was.
So there is a
one of one's
context
mind, yeah.
as well. So,
You know, do you feel that, I mean, the old Greek word for it was catharsis, right? With, you know, you go to see something like that and then somehow you're purged of something, or maybe it's an integration, I don't know. But what do you think that something is? I mean, is that,
I don't know if that happens, quite frankly. If you are, I don't know, seeing Oedipus, and he ends up having finally, given all the issues, but finally to take a look at the mistakes, all of them, that he's made. Some, the murders, family member, and even has been warned by the chorus, a member of the chorus, the oracle, and ultimately he comes, and he is the tragic hero, comes to see what he's done with his life and how he hasn't understood, hasn't paid attention. The fact that he basically was held in such high esteem because he essentially solved that riddle. Was it the Gordian knot, maybe? Boy, I'm not thinking where that is.
that I'm not remembering, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Gordian knot was the Alexander the Great, right, where he cut
Yes,
the knot in half.
you're absolutely right.
Yeah,
I think it was, and I don't know where to talk about it, and here I am
no, it wasn't the riddle of the Sphinx, was it?
being
I think I'm off with that. That's,
being really stupid. Doesn't make much difference.
You've got a lot in your hand. Yeah.
Yes.
You got a lot going on.
Yes.
You know, it's okay.
But he comes into the play then with a hell of an ego. And basically sees himself as heroic, can do no wrong, and in the process, he obviously does. And so that when he blinds himself, essentially what it's saying is that he could not see while he had sight. He had to, once he discovered, blind himself because essentially his view of the world, he can't trust his sight, let's put it at that. So that finally there is that particular thing, and he's goes off with the oracle. So to talk about catharsis, if you are one of those individuals and you sitting in the audience and you connect to that, maybe there is a catharsis. Maybe you see yourself as an individual who has a big ego, who has made some mistakes, or seeing that begins to worry whether or not he's going to do that.
Yeah, and that's, to me, that's the big mirror, you
Yeah.
know, because and there's so many elements too. I mean, I think great plays have all of these different elements. Like with that, say you have the person in the audience who's in some way identifying with Oedipus.
Yeah.
I mean, is that on the level of having what Freud would call an Oedipal complex or Oedipus complex? Is that on the level of, hey, you know, I've thought about murdering somebody and I'm scared
Yeah.
of myself? And there's a lot of different.
I agree. Of course, what I think Freud especially was dealing in terms of the Oedipus complex was Oedipus' relationship to his father. You know, he marries his mother and he kills his father, Jesus. How more
Depraved.
nuts? But he didn't know.
Right.
I really hadn't got the necessary information to be able to do that.
Or you know, is it that he had the information but was just wanted to do what he wanted to do? You know, I mean,
Sure.
a creature of impulse.
I think you could find a way of being able to drive it. I think the Greek civilization, culture, world would not allow that, however. They needed that lesson.
Right.
And that's what their playwrights were constantly looking.
Yeah, like how can we teach about civility and social interaction
Yeah.
in such a way that's not too terribly offensive, but is
I
effective?
agree, yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah. But it's always fascinating though, isn't it? One of the important things about theater is that it's live, yes, and you find a way of getting more involved with that, I think. And the connection between the actors, between and among the actors, and the language is a major part of what you're going to, but it's the live quality of that I
do
think.
you feel like people are missing that a lot more nowadays? I mean, just because, I mean, we're all so inundated with, you know, texting and blah, 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 blah. But
Oh, wow, yeah, I think maybe I think that has some truth.
I mean, because there's still plenty of theater going on. You don't need to look too far, but, you know, unless I'm hanging out with someone who's into theater, I'm usually not having theater conversations with people. Like, hey, did you see that production they did down there of, you know, the whatever? And most of the time, no, but I did see the new Avengers movie, right? Which is great too.
Yeah.
I mean, I love
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
It's just different.
Well, but you're talking about, and the same thing is true, I guess, with drama. You can go from one to the other to the different things, and it's just like the individual I talked about who's only going to go to comedies, does not want to be challenged, and I think that's what it is, does not want to see Again, I guess a good example is Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. There are many who won't go see Glass Menagerie
Right.
for the same reasons.
Well, there's all, yeah, I mean, you could probably run through all the Ibsen plays and Strindberg and.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
I think
there's just a lot
that's
of
true.
depressing stuff and.
Although one of the things that happens with, let's say, Tennessee Williams, is that he has such a reputation. The number of films, if you will, made from his plays, good or bad, is quite a bit in number. And so I think he's more recognizable among the general public than individuals who aren't that way. Lanford Wilson is a wonderful playwright. Well, hardly anybody remembers him or knows him, but I love his work.
Yeah, and probably may not have had enough time to develop because, yeah, I mean, or to be into. The other thing too is living in America. I think, especially the American South, I think we are more exposed to Williams in general. And,
Could be.
You know, versus like say if you're saying, well, I haven't seen a lot of productions of Chekhov in film, but if we were living in Russia,
Maybe.
you know, there are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because I know there are at least two, like, films of three sisters I mean, there's, it doesn't really matter anyway. I mean, I think what you said a minute ago about the live experience, I think that's the thing, and it's, I think there's something about today versus say 30 or 40 years ago that where people don't seem to want to, as an audience, go to the emotional depths that maybe they once did.
Yeah.
That might be my projection or like my own,
Yeah.
you know,
So,
reality, but
Definitely true.
yeah.
Like it's hard, especially for really young people. They want.
So Aaron, you're agreeing that you're relatively young.
Right.
Do you make choices simply based on, boy, this is a dark film or movie, play, I don't know if I'm gonna go to it.
Not really. I don't consume a lot of live theater,
Right,
but you know, you get the same thing in movies though. With younger people want to be entertained on a different level, I guess, than like it would be hard for me to sit down with a younger person and watch this in Kane, and they'd be like, "Well, this is boring." You know, there's this level
Yeah.
that they can
yeah.
get to between the lines in movies that people used to be able to get to.
Well, and I think what's interesting to me is how our young folks grow up. If in fact, and they have experienced, been educated in, have seen as they're growing up, especially live theater.
Yeah.
I think going to see a film or anything's on TV is not an issue. They're everywhere.
Yeah.
But if you've grown up seeing theater and you find a connection there, then you're going to keep doing that, I think.
Hello, I'm Chip Sebastian. I am the co-host of Sebastian and Sierp. If you've been liking the shows, please click like down below. And if you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel, jump on over to YouTube, click subscribe, and you will get the most recent episodes of our show where we're interviewing all kinds of great and interesting people. So we're looking forward to a lot more shows. Stay tuned. It's rolling. Just begun. Joe, I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about when you are putting a show together, and what is it it sounds a little bit like a James Lipton type question. but
Are you going to ask me what swear words I really like at the
Right.
end of this? Yeah.
I won't be that obsequious, or Joe, what do you look for? Yeah, I won't do that. James, if you're out there watching, I'm sorry. All right, I'm terribly sorry. But you know, what is it you're looking for in an actor on an audition? Because we all know that some actors audition extremely well.
Yes.
Others do not.
Well, and very often the ones who audition extremely well basically show what they have, and it's never going to get better, I
Right.
find.
Yeah. So you can develop them
yeah.
over a 3-month or whatever process.
Yeah, you know, what's important to me is, in a practical sense, I like to have seen some of the work that they've done around here. I think that's rather important.
So just the live
Yeah.
resume.
Yeah, and incidentally, my daughter Hannah went to theater school at UCLA, and she's now in LA. And you maybe know this, I was just taken aback and didn't know that a lot of the auditions, at least initial auditions, are emailed, sent to the producing entity, and we'll have, if you've got, as they call it, a reel that you can put on and they can see what you do, then that's what they want, along with a resume, along with being able to see you. But in the beginning, that's where a lot of casting is done. I just
Wow.
find that.
Right.
But maybe that works for the guys, especially doing film. I don't know. Okay, where was I going? What do I look for? I like very much at an audition
I don't remember if I hit it or not.
that an actor is, as we kind of say, fearless, has no problem with showing himself or herself. We'll always talk about the idea that developing audition pieces, that there is no way in the world that you can know if you come in reading, or even if you come in and having memorized, let's say, an audition, that you can know what that director sitting out there wants. So you really don't want to try to, because you screw yourself up. What you come in with, in terms of those several audition pieces that you've put together, and there are different ways of showing who you are and what you can do. What I really want to see is a connection somehow that is real, is energized, is fun, and that I'm seeing that person, and I end up having a really strong impression that they're capable of, I guess a lot of us call it, I certainly do, exploring the world and the role, so that there is no fear in terms of just going to get it once you get into rehearsals. And most of the time, at least not initially, I don't direct, or I don't block. I pretty much, we have a semblance of the set, and then what we work out of is connecting actors, developing the listing we've talked about, and developing those important things that an actor really needs if he's going to go forward to his intention, her intention. Basically what that is what do you want? I mean, why are you here and what do you want?
Right.
How do you deal with the conflicts that come to you from other actors? Because that really helps the connection then as you go on. but it's so important to know why you're doing what you're doing.
What do you want? Why
Yeah,
are you doing
yeah,
it?
yeah.
You know, what are the
With that,
obstacles?
And
And what's going to happen if you don't get it?
so, and often, you know, the old Stanislavski, what would we say?
Move it into
Yes.
tricky territory there, Joe.
Well, I'm sure it is. One of his mantras, maybe that puts it best, is, as an actor, what you need to do is, what would I do if I were this character put in this situation and must accomplish whatever it is? So it isn't that you're trying to stand outside yourself and simply try to interpret without making that all-important connection as a human being. Does that make sense to you?
It does. I was just wondering if you're an actor and you know what role you're going to play, do you begin with some kind of psychological outline of the character in order to know what they're going to
Yeah.
do? And
Yeah, I like to do, as it's called, table talk at the beginning. We read and begin to talk about relationships. We begin to talk about motivation and intention and that sort of thing. And who is ultimately this individual in this world? And again, what do you want? What do you want? That's just absolutely crucial. But it takes you into yourself as opposed to just letting the lines themselves. I think there's not enough, as I watch as an audience member or a director. I really need to see the honesty, and ultimately that doesn't come from being very good to superficially interpret the lines. You have a basic understanding of what they mean and where they're going, but it's hollow otherwise.
Falls flat.
Yeah,
You know.
and it really does.
Well, and I think sometimes too, there's something to be said about the writing, because you know, if you have something that's been tried and tested like Shakespeare or Williams, you know that, hey, this has been done, and it's been done very well, and it's effective, and we all know it. So there isn't any escape in the sense of the writing sucks, right? But if you're doing a play that you yourself have written, or someone you know has written, or something like that, then, and the play hasn't been put together for the characters where the motivation, you know, for, you know, to use an overused word, or what do I want is not told or shown or
Sure.
developed, then there's really nothing for the actor to grab onto in terms of here's the through line, like, you know, I want to get revenge, you know,
Right,
you know,
right.
and here's why. And so I think that there's something to be said for the writing, and also I think that I think people have it's really tough to hang with a lot of modern movies, or like my wife and I, for instance, we have a 10-minute rule. We'll put a movie on. If it's not 10 minutes, if the hook isn't there, forget it. There's too much other stuff
Sure.
to do, right? But usually it's because of that. It's because
Yeah.
you know, you all have not let us know what you're after with this. We don't know why we're watching this. This could be some family videos for all we know.
Or how do you make it work? One of the real problems, if you want to go back in time, you mentioned Ibsen and other plays that are being developed even before that and coming into that, is that there was, and it was almost a requirement, seemingly, that you get everything the audience needs to know by way of exposition out
Right.
in the first 10 minutes. And it's just like, oh, geez, is this ever going to end?
Right. No surprises
My
ever.
relationship or whatever else. What's the play about? I have no idea. But I'm beginning to know who these people are.
Sure.
And there was even a playwriting book I'm thinking that talked about that moment after exposition called the inciting moment, where the play then begins to go where it intends to go. And up to that point, it's all just exposition. And it was kind of how they were looking at various things. And the rules ought to be, there ought to be no rules, quite frankly.
See, that is exactly, that's the way I feel, because, in training, there's all this stuff. Well, I do classical acting. Well, I do method. What is classical? What is method?
Right.
You got 10 people with 10 different ideas about both, especially method, right? And then you say, well, the method is just whatever method you've developed for yourself. What does that mean? So you go down these endless rabbit holes, and in the end, you're still back to the same issue of, here's my character. I need to know what they want. You know what I mean? It's back to that issue for me personally. And I think we have so much literature and help on what particularly classical acting is now, in terms of, well, I'll go and find the right wardrobe. I'll get a cape, and then now I'm starting to,
There you go.
the Olivier thing, and now, I become this thing. And I think both work. I think, they're terrific performances.
Well,
both.
what I think is that whatever works
Whatever works, right.
for you,
Yeah.
then that's the key. As you go on, it truly is.
I think being tribal as we are, because we're just designed that way, I think it's easy to fall into these camps. And so if you get with some friends that you happen to like, and they all say, well, we've been reading Stanislavski, and and a few others, and we do Meisner too, but that's what we do. So if you want to be with the cool kids, you've got to do that too. And so I think there's this weird, I don't know, I guess cliquishness is maybe the right word.
Yeah,
That's it.
there can be,
Yeah.
yeah, I think so.
But then, I think too, maybe age has something to do with some things, because as the years have rolled on, I honestly could care less. And the interest in sort of theater or film or any kind of snobbery is sort of like,
Yes.
and it's more like, man, where can I find a performance where I go in and I leave there going, God, that really, something altered inside me. And, I got to sit with this for a little while. It's like, where do you find that? In a highly desensitized, text-driven, high traffic world.
I will tell you a story that, if any of the theater folks around will have heard me, but it says so much, I think, about these things that we're saying. Olivier was still head of the theater in England. Geez, Joe, never mind.
The old Vic.
Yeah, thank you, I think. Maybe
Or the National.
The
He was
National,
with
there
the
it is,
National.
there it is. And they were involved in doing a play, and I think it was a classic piece. It doesn't make any difference what it was. But they had a night where it was magical. Everybody on stage connected, was listening, was playing, and it was like suddenly they're elevated. And this world is their world. They live in it, and they're going through it. The intentions are clear. They're essentially buoying up one another because of their work. And they come to feel the audience is driving along with them. Incidentally, this is one of the things why I think audiences go. That this wonderful thing happens where that element and that element come together. And as an actor, I'm sure you know when you've got an audience working with you. And it's a sense you're just feeling. And you're transported on stage by this. The show ended. They got something like 12 or 14 standing ovations, called back to wow. And one of the individuals in it was Ann Jackson. And she was coming back to the dressing rooms and had to go by Olivier's. And the door was partly open. And she heard him filling the room with obscenities. He was throwing furniture against the wall. He was out of his mind, seemingly. So she said she knocked timidly and said, "Larry, how'd you like that?" No, Olivier could call him Larry. I always thought that was amazing. "Larry, what is going on? What is the matter?" That was the best experience I've ever had on stage. We were all there, and we were all in the same world, and we were working, and it was absolutely transporting. And she said he turned around and looked at her, and he had tears in his eyes. And he said, "Yes, and I don't know why."
Yeah.
Now that says a lot about the nature of live theater, because if you go to a film, you know, you're not affecting anything that's going on in the film. But I think one of the things has to do with the live nature, as we talked about before, and that you very much can affect that as you go, and it works then both ways. But my God, would you not like to have that? They developed a name for it, Magic Time.
Yeah, but something that's not replicatable.
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
And it's just, you can't define it. Can't even really talk about it. You can describe it to a certain extent, but the inherent involvement is mystical, magical, ineffable, all of those things. But actors just live, obviously, for that. And probably pretty much anybody you talk to would tell you they had at least a few moments of something like that, where everything they were doing was honest and real. The world was the one you lived in then.
It's the line between order and chaos.
Yes, and so much, and it's wonderful. Just one, and to a certain degree, I think you're always looking for that, and one of the real questions is, how do you ever get even close to that?
Yeah, you know, I mean, what you're describing, I believe, is why a lot of actors act, though.
Oh, sure.
It's
Sure.
that very thing.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's why a lot of musicians love to play too. It's the, you know, there's
It's
the zone
transporting.
or whatever the magic word is for it.
I think so.
But yeah, but live is so different too, in the sense that you know that you can have that moment. Like I know we all here have had the experience of watching a film and then watching it again 30 years later and going, wow, that film is so different. Well, we know the film's
Sure.
not different.
Sure.
Logically, emotionally, we don't know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
logically, we know. So, of course, that's the constant in the equation. We're the variable, right? But here with theater, it's more like there's a variable and a variable,
That's correct.
right?
I
And
was
so,
just going to say, absolutely.
yeah, and it's just really different experience. And I mean, I think especially if you're performing it, because if you're performing it and it's kind of mandatory that you're at every performance, not just as an observer, then it's like, wow, this was really different than last night or whenever.
And oh, by the way, I can't call this in.
Yeah, right.
I'm there in live. I got to play this.
Yeah.
And there are those times, however, when something's in your way. An incident or something in your life that's hard to get rid of,
Sure.
and you carry in with you.
Well, you know, the scariest experience I ever had to do, and everyone will remain nameless, of course, but had to do with a co-star that I was in a play with. It was a Neil Simon play, and Yeah, she would come in, I could smell alcohol during every performance.
Yeah.
And so we were
Yeah.
getting concerned,
Yeah.
and then it was opening night, and there were lines dropped, and there was, blocking that was wrong and all kinds of things, and I was terrified. But that taught me a valuable lesson, aside from don't
Yeah,
do
yeah.
plays with people
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can't trust, But it taught me a valuable lesson, that is, whatever it's gonna be, it's gonna be. And because I think as an actor and as a director too, once you let your babies fly, you have to sort of say, well, there it is, and I no longer have the reins.
But as an actor, I think you have got to go into then your performances and the work, and you absolutely trust everybody who's a part of the cast along with the director or whatever. If there's an issue of not trusting, then I think, as you experienced, and probably everybody has, it just niggles at you when you're on stage and you're playing, and you've experienced difficulties so that creating those relationships and that world, you're just a little worried, tentative, because you're not trusting anybody else. Not anybody, but a certain individual. And
Sure.
Are they going to be there or not? And that certainly has happened. I remember doing summer stock very early on. There's a theater in Montana called the Flathead Summer Playhouse.
That's great.
And it's a wonderful lake, a big lake in Montana. And so in the summer you would do that. But we had just it's very happy and fun, but so strange, and did not play major roles, often not second leads. And
Was it rep? So you were
yeah.
trading,
The deal was then, because there was a bar right next to the theater, that he may have had 20 minutes or whatever free time, and he'd just skip on out and go into the bar and have a drink or two and then get back in time, most of the time, to come in and play his role. But often it wasn't quite the same each time, or you don't know, oh my God, where is he? And it's so yeah, that can be just scary.
Sure.
I think.
Yeah. Yeah, it's right. Yeah. I mean, not being able to trust someone's bad enough, but especially if, performance or
Yeah.
a show hinges on.
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah.
but-
I think so.
what have you done in those I mean, have you had a lot of situations like that where you've had to tell somebody, hey, this isn't working, even though we're,
not.
have you just cast really well, or?
I think.
Yeah.
And established, if you will, ground rules to begin with. Don't have much, but it's show up, know your lines, and don't bump into the furniture.
Right. But, I mean, this,
Yes,
really
I
what
know.
we're talking about, though, makes the case for why a lot of directors prefer to work with some actors again and again. And to me, that's...
You're exactly right.
Yeah, it's like, hey, I just don't want, I know these people, and I don't want to deal with any crap.
I had that experience not that long ago, and it was tough. One of my actors said, this person comes in often and obviously has been drinking. You can smell the liquor, and that just bothers me. And I said, well, all right, let's see, give it 2 or 3 days, and if it continues, then I'll have to sit down and talk to the person, and eventually I had to. And I think you've got to confront it, make it clear, essentially ask, do you really want to be doing this? Because if you do, that can't be a part of what it is that we do.
Sure, right.
And, I really think that is. Sometimes you can have an actor who is just a real pain, not drinking or anything else, just difficult as hell.
Was arrogant or something like that.
Yeah, might come in and hasn't lived here, just, came to Lexington a short time ago. And comes in, let's say, with a resume. Maybe comes from New York. Took classes at Actors Studio. And so that's on the resume. But, like Oedipus, that ego has gotten so big that he had no compunction about directing other actors while they're on the stage.
Oh, so he's trying to do your job.
And well, yeah, and was seeing, and oftentimes we were working proscenium, oftentimes we just started doing odd things, like he's in a scene that we're playing, and he just simply starts to work up stage, and especially with somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience. So of course what happens is the other actor just turns to talk to him until finally that whole thing is done, and one actor has his back to the audience throughout the whole thing. And this one is standing up there with a half smirk on his face and just playing it. And you have to say, good God, what is the matter? Or is kind of whispering maybe when they're off stage and you got to take care of it. Or he's just so nasty. I was told of a time when a guy like that so pissed off a member or two of the cast he was with that they finished rehearsal, and the one actor confronted him outside, pushed him, and I can't remember if he hit him or not, but he threatened him and said, don't you dare come back again and do that shit you're doing, because I'll quit or you'll quit and we'll go on from there. I mean, that's no way to have, you talk about trust. There was absolutely no trust there. We had a guy one summer that worked with that could not remember his lines, and he got cast as a lead. Waltz of the Toreadors, maybe it was, which don't expect anybody to remember or know anything about, but ultimately ended up having to post where you couldn't see him, his lines all over the set. There was part of the set was a counter. It was, I can't remember if it was a kitchen or a bar, but he had a bunch behind that, and when he didn't know, he would disappear behind the bar and would continue to talk, and he's looking at those, and then he comes back up again when he feels it got to be just the funniest thing, and the audience had no real idea truly what was going on. They just thought, this is really weird.
And he was playing it off like it was the blocking or
whatever. Yes. Gee.
Yeah.
There,
It's
as
rough.
you point out, there's so many just stories like that in your theater experience, and I think pretty much unlike everyday professions or whatever. At the GIF company, I bet you don't have a lot of stories, do you, to tell?
No, I have plenty, I just can't share it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Still need the employment, so.
Yeah.
Yep.
They wouldn't allow him in the theater, you know what I mean?
That would be,
There'd be a riot. Yeah, it'd be like, what was it? Remember that French play that was so famous where they rioted? Where they stood up and said, yelled mayor.
yeah. I think that was Waiting for Godot, actually.
Was that Godot? Okay, yeah. But they rioted, so that would have been Godot. That would have been 50s, right?
And they also, with Stravinsky's first thing, which was played in France, the audience
The Firebird?
booed and cheers. No, it was, I think, maybe Firebird?
The Firebird Suite.
Yeah, it may have been that.
Yeah. They
Anyway,
booed it. Oh, wow.
it was the coming of the 12-tone scale,
Mm-hmm.
and I find his music just compelling and going.
Oh, yeah.
But it
It's
was
music of the Russian Revolution, man.
it didn't belong at that particular time in the music world. And
Well, I mean, usually innovation brings about,
oh, sure,
you know,
and it's change.
sure.
Change is hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is your favorite, do you have a favorite play to direct or a favorite playwright to direct?
Boy, not a play. There are playwrights I really love. Shakespeare, obviously. Tennessee Williams. I'm trying to. Those are such a focus, and have been in my life. Arthur Miller, I certainly like. I'm trying to think what else. I mentioned Lanford Wilson a while back, and I liked him. He was back in the 80s,
Right.
and writing. But then it's just whatever comes along, and I find an attachment to that I love, and I want to live with that for a while with my actors, and find out what can we find in this play.
Yeah, back to what we were talking about, the theater of reality, or the everyday, or as seen on Channel 36,
Sure.
or whatever. So you feel that theater is just bubbling up out of these things that are going on anyway?
Yeah, in I think many ways. Emotionally, I think you can end up finding that a playwright can, and work with it. An actor can, in terms of what it is they're seeing. Now, I think that actor has got to be able to, I'm sorry, the only word I can think of is too big a one, subsume what they're seeing in terms of emotion, and it becomes his or her own emotion coming out of that. But I think they can find that, which is, part of what actors do, especially when they find themselves playing, I don't know, an addict, any of those kinds of things for which they might not have. And this could be just basic knowledge. What do you do? I'm not really talking here about necessarily the emotion. It's that world. I need to have some sense of that world in terms of carrying it in. And what's in the play is not enough at this point. So
Gotcha.
we can go and find that, and it's the kind of work I think an actor needs to do. Discovering elements of the world. Let's say they're doing Shakespeare, or no, let's say it's a modern show and it takes place in the South, but you don't happen to have grown up in the South. I think you got to know something about that. The emotions, I think, are in so many ways both specific and general, relative to how you come into that particular world. So, sure, you can find any number of things out. Just finding a dialect, I think, and working maybe with somebody who is a part of that. And it isn't just then the music of that dialect. You also get a chance to see this person who knows it and knows it very well.
Mm-hmm.
And,
And how can I-
in terms of,
how can I-
and that's a way of adding then to your,
And some of that becomes you.
yeah.
And it
Oh,
wouldn't
heavens,
be
yes.
you unless you did that.
I think it has to be, again, yeah. That's where you find the honesty, I think, in terms of what it is that you're doing.
Yeah, and I mean, I really feel that there's something in people who want to act a lot that is looking for some kind of identity thing. I can't wrap words around it exactly, but it's, or I should say, I feel that way for myself. Maybe other people,
Yeah.
do, but there's something about that is a teaching thing about how to be or how to live, but it's just so odd to me that humans need that. You know, when you think about it on a logical level, just pure logic, and you say, why would you go through all that?
Yeah.
You know,
As an actor, you mean?
well, right. In other words, you know, if you decide, boy, acting is just really, I feel really drawn to it. I mean, people must feel drawn to it. Nobody goes and says, I think I'll be an actor
Agreed.
because it's a great financial decision.
Agreed,
Right?
yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's something about
yeah.
the artist that is so interested in expressing and reconfiguring things for people to, you know, have a new interpretation or new.
And to be able to take that, I think. Why don't we take a break? Let me look on my phone. I had a thing.
So you're saying you got something there from,
Well, I do, and I think fits into what we're talking about and that whole process. It's Martha Graham who's writing, and she said, there is a vitality, a life force and energy, a quickening that is translated through you into action, and because there is only one of you in all time, this expression is unique. And if you block it, it will never exist through any other medium, and it will be lost. The world will not have it. It is not your business to determine how good it is, nor how valuable, nor how it compares with other expressions. It is your business to keep it yours clearly and directly, to keep the channel open. You do not even have to believe in yourself or your work. You have to keep yourself open and aware to the urges that motivate you. Keep the channel open. And this is interesting, I think. No artist is pleased. There is no satisfaction whatever at any time. There is only a queer divine dissatisfaction, a blessed unrest that keeps us marching and makes us more alive than the others. I just find that so remarkable.
that's very nice. Yeah.
So, thank Shane Brakefield. He sent that out recently.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I'll have to go look that one up.
Yeah.
Keep it on my wall or something. So do you have big influences? I mean, since you focused largely on directing for years and years, and we've been talking about acting a great deal, do you have huge influences director-wise? People you look to as...
I love individual work. I will tell you that the individual director who has meant the most to me in terms of those seminal, formative kinds of ideas, and then the work that I could do, was Peter Brook.
Oh,
And it was, for example, one of the things that he says in the opening, in the open space,
or a empty
empty,
space.
geez,
Yeah.
hit me over the head. Send me home.
We're here. It's
with
okay.
that.
We're good. Yeah.
Oh, God. Anyway, in the empty space, one of the things he said was he started out as a new director and had some success and was invited to do a Shakespeare play, didn't say what it was. And it was going to go, I think, into the Old Vic. Anyway, a major advance for him. And so he worked with this. He got a model of the stage. He got little people that he worked with on the stage, trying to set up how he was going to block and where they were going to move. And he was essentially noting all of this in his director's script and took it to the first rehearsals. And he said, finally, none of that made any sense. The people were not these little people that I could move around the stage. They were living, breathing, had their own response to what was being said and where they were going. And he said, I finally, I think, threw that model and the little people in the trash, and we went back and began to develop an ensemble and the world, and discovered through rehearsal, through the exploration of how this needed to break down. And my experience, as little as it was up to that point, was one of blocking of essentially, and it was okay. It was what I knew. But I read that and I thought, oh my God, that's really eye-opening. That's astonishing. And so much then of my work since then has essentially taken that idea.
So you mean astonishing in the sense that he realized it needed to be more organic and it was his
Correct.
relationship
Absolutely
with the
correct,
actors
yes.
versus
And
I'm doing a Hitchcock cattle call type thing.
And that's where we go. I know that I frustrate any number of actors have over the years because I'm not telling them what to do. I'm telling, what do you want? I'm telling them to listen. Let's explore this, and we can explore a particular beat in any number of ways. And you end up, every time you play that, you end up discovering things. But it may not ever be any of the things that we've been playing with. I surely will block things like entrances and exits. If you've got a multiple level set, I certainly will end up playing something that I wanted to on those levels. If I want to see more movement, I will indicate that, and then let's play with that. But so much of it for me comes honestly out of the actors and how they encounter then the play.
So
And
you're really, as a director, just trying to get out of their way and kind of elicit stuff from them.
Yes,
Yeah.
although one of the other frustrations, a lot of what I do has me wandering on stage with the actors.
Yeah.
And I can whisper in their ears and do what Viola Spolin called side coaching. And essentially just saying, okay, let's, and I don't know, I can remember times when actors would talk about the process or what we're doing and would say, well, you know, you're working, there you are, and suddenly you look and there's Farrell standing right in your ear. and in an effort then to help them not do something right, I don't think there is a right, but to encourage them to take something further, Maybe to try playing over there as we can go along. I think it's a waste of time for me in the beginning to block. That can take a week or more. And for me, that's simply lost time when you could be exploring right from the beginning.
Right.
And opening up what we want to do and making discoveries right off the bat. If you block, my opinion again, and I'm sure it would be challenged by any number of individuals, what you set up the actor to do is try to remember as you work through it what it was that I told them. No real connection to character. Just, okay, I'm saying this, where did I need to be? And I think it's time that is much better spent looking for ways to internalize, to make what you're doing yours. And it over a period of time, it could change because we continue
Because
to explore.
it's going back to what you were saying earlier about what is it I want.
Oh, absolutely.
Right, so it's
Yes.
really like you're just
Yes.
going back to that constantly.
Yeah.
And even if it's something like, well, I want a glass of milk
Sure.
that's over in the fridge.
And whatever is going on there.
Because the one is what produces the action of acting.
Right.
Right.
And so I would say then that you can act what you want. You can't act a state of being, for example. You can't act, I have to be angry here.
Right.
Okay, why? Well, it says.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Or show me
okay,
philosophical.
Where does that come? Or sure, anything, any of those things. It has to relate to things that are actionable.
Well, see, it's interesting because I remember when we do script breakdowns in class years ago, and a big thing was about if you already have a presupposition about what an adjective looks like. You know, like if I say, okay, well, I'm something in the script says, well, he looks pensive. Okay, it's like, well, what does pensive look like? And then your mind flashes to
exactly
some
right.
image of whomever in a show, and you go, well, he kind of looked pensive to
Yeah,
me.
well-
And then you try to replicate that, which flies in the face of authenticity and doesn't really become acting, right? And so it's like built into the action is whatever is going to organically come out of you is the
That's
action.
correct.
Yeah,
And the things that ultimately are actable are the verbs.
Right, just doing.
Yes, and it is doing. In fact, there's a book somewhere that says acting is doing. Yeah, and you can think, you know.
You know, what's fascinating to me too is that if you have something that has a whole lot of action in a play, like say you're doing something that's a lot of, you know, like say farce, you're doing some real big time physical comedy, you know, importance of being earnest, something like that, you know, where there's a lot of stuff. You know, you already have that built into the script, and so there's action that's presentable and watchable and fun. But what I find too is that, like in body movement in general, like with dancing, for instance, like one of the things we always have students look at when they first come in is this curve of learning chart, you know, and we, you know, Arthur Murray's used that for many years. Initial learning, you learn how to do a step. Awkward use, I can do it, but boy, I feel weird. Conscious use, I know what I'm doing, but I'm still having to think about it. I'm in my head a lot. And then natural use, you know, I walk into a place and I'm doing a cha-cha. I didn't even realize I was doing it. I've done it so much. And to me, getting to the conscious use stage with theatrical performance is the same thing, except for dialogue a lot of times. To me, action doesn't get in the way.
dialogue, for me personally, gets in,
Yeah.
or can get in the way.
Well, in terms of what you're talking back there about your chart, is interesting, I think, and this sounds too mundane, but I think ultimately, as an actor, working the rehearsals, finding your character, ultimately, you have to forget. And you just
Right.
play the reality and what's there. It may and probably won't be exactly what it was. I think you're killing yourself if you had, let's say, last night, what you felt like a really, really good moments here. So what you're thinking is, I need to try to recreate those.
Right.
You can't. So you're suddenly knocked out of this performance because you're trying to remember. And by the time you try to connect, and maybe you're doing it, all those moments have gone by while you're trying, and so you've lost touch with everything.
And that to me is one of the biggest lessons, and it goes way outside of theater, just to being human, and that is how easy it is to get caught up in living in the past.
Yeah, oh sure.
Where it's like, I'm got this memory trace of neurons firing in my head, and I remember what I think happened, and let me recreate that. And of course, it's never recreated in the way you deem fit or the way you think is right.
And to try to do that, I basically say, is just kind of death. I think, however, that's kind of the way a lot of early acting training is.
Right. Yeah. But I think too, there's a big lesson there for life in general, where being pattern-seeking primates, as we are, in other words, there's a built-in thing of, we learn a pattern, and part of that is for survival, right? Like, hey, I put my hand on the stove and it really hurt, and I won't do that anymore, right? And maybe I go and I have a milkshake and I say, boy, this tastes good. I might do that again, right? So there are these patterns that are repeating, but at the same time, there's like you said, some kind of death in the pattern itself, or the trying to recapture a moment that happened.
And that's simply built in. You respond how you respond.
Yeah.
I think of the big example of that is in our town, when we have the two kids in the soda shop. And of course, everything is pantomimed in that for the most part.
Right.
And so there they are, and it's such a nice scene and nice moments, but they're also having to deal with the drinks that they have, and take drinks occasionally. And sometimes the act of tasting the drink is more important than the connection they're looking to make, because it's pantomimed, right? And that's one of the important aspects of that, when it really isn't. It really isn't.
But I mean, what you just said, though, to me, it transcends. Like for instance, if I'm drinking coffee, okay, not to be too weird or whatever about it, but if I'm drinking coffee, and then there's.
And why do you do it differently?
Well, and that becomes the question of, for me, experience. A lot of times for me, I want the experience. So there's something about being in the moment of, boy, I'm really savoring this.
You're savoring, and however, if that's your only intention in doing a play, it somehow is important that it connects not to the fact that you're savoring, but to what's happening within the scene.
Hello, I'm Chip Sebastian. I am the co-host of Sebastian and Sierp. If you've been liking the shows, please click like down below. And if you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel, jump on over to YouTube, click subscribe, and you will get the most recent episodes of our show, where we're interviewing all kinds of
great and interesting people. So we're looking forward to a lot more shows. Stay tuned. It's rolling. Just begun. All right, folks, we're back once again talking with Joe Farrell. Been talking a whole lot about theater and many other things. We hope you've been enjoying it. Yeah, Joe, I wanted to make sure, I don't know if the episode will air in time, if you've got a show coming up, or if you've been working on something. Is that the case? Or?
No.
You have not?
No.
Okay. Okay, you hear that, folks? Joe wants a gig. So,
Yes, please.
So anybody out there doing Seneca, please contact Joe.
First, what you need to do is lock that in a closet.
That's right.
Don't open it.
Now I know that aren't there some changes going on down at Woodford?
Yes, actually, Trish Clark has
'cause they're having
resigned.
an evening
Yeah,
thing
it was
together, right.
time for her to do that.
Yeah.
And so they've got a new artistic director. They've done a very smart thing. Trish handled both the artistic director side of that program and also a lot of the fundraising and the other kinds of things. And I really think you can't split things like that. So what they've got now is a young woman who is the artistic director, and I don't know whether they've hired somebody or not, but they're getting somebody to do the more business promotional side.
Okay.
And that's just super.
Yeah,
That's
Woodford's
super.
a great venue.
Yeah, sure is. I wish there was a theater like that over here.
Yeah.
I go there, and each time I work there, I'm saying, all right,
Yes.
why? Why isn't there? I obviously it's because haven't been able to find the money, the community involvement, especially I think the community involvement and individuals who are able to find grants, individuals who are willing to help put one of those up. And to do it, but golly, that's just a great space.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Right. Well, Joe, we want to thank you for being on the show tonight. We're
My
hoping to
pleasure.
have you back. We hope you'd like to do that at some future date.
Absolutely.
And folks, Sebastian Sierp, Aaron, and I are signing off. We want to thank Joe Farrell for being with us and being very generous with his time, talking to us in depth about theater and many other things. And we look forward to seeing you next time on Sebastian and Sierp.
Thank you.
Now in its 5th season, the Athens West Theater Company begins the Season of Hope. Brighton Beach Memoirs, the classic by Neil Simon, will run from October 4th through the 20th. Please visit Athens West on Facebook or at their website at athenswest.net or call 859-425-2550. There's something about my house that holds the past. My body holds spirit in similar stead, memorizes and sells with potential flame, ghosts of the worlds by flesh and bone fed. The walls of this room are my heart's strength, the sink my blood that flows with fire. The bedroom holds my resting bones, the brick my flesh and fair attire. I was a boy who lost his way on the winding wood of spirits slain. No memory, no fair words portray on the glade where kings and princes reign. A castle under the silver moon hovering by the sea that pounds below the thundering sky to infinity. A maiden in the castle keep, her hero in the moat. A girl who for her lover weeps, armed guards in every boat. Find these poems and many more at lulu.com, Lulu, Lulu.com, under Charles Sebastian. Charles Sebastian, Seasons of the Centaur, available at lulu.com.